35,000 feet over the Atlantic, a wealthy tech mogul clutches his pregnant wife's hand as she gasps for air, her life and unborn child slipping away with each breath. The crew calls for a doctor, but no one answers, until a teenage black boy in economy stands up. Calm, focused, and ignored by everyone moments before, he steps forward with one request. Let him try. What the passengers don't know is this kid isn't just smart. He's about to save 2 lives and change all 3 forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the cabin lights had dimmed, and most passengers had drifted into a quiet haze of sleep or silence. But something wasn't right. In seat 2A, Lauren Callister shifted uncomfortably, her hand pressed against her chest. Her breathing had grown shallow, fast, uneven. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. "Evan, I can't breathe." Her husband, Evan Callister, turned instantly, alarm flashing across his face. "What, Lauren?" he asked, rising so quickly from his reclined seat that his champagne glass tipped onto the floor. Across the aisle, a flight attendant named Monica rushed over, her face composed but tight with concern. Lauren's skin had gone pale, her lips tinted blue. "Is there a doctor on board?" Monica called out, urgency rising in her voice. Another attendant emerged with a bright orange medical kit. "We need medical assistance immediately," she repeated down the aisle. In the back of the plane, in seat 32B, 17-year-old Noah Benson sat bolt upright. He'd been half asleep, headphones still playing quiet instrumental music from his study playlist. But those words, trouble breathing, pregnant, medical emergency, snapped him into full alert. His mind raced. Lower chest pressure, pale skin, labored breaths. He'd seen this before. Once when his grandmother, Mrs. Laverne Benson, nearly collapsed on their apartment floor in Oakland. That time the paramedics said it was a pulmonary embolism. And that woman up front? The symptoms sounded the same. Noah looked around. Nobody else was moving. No one was standing up. Maybe a doctor was asleep or afraid to speak up, or maybe there wasn't one. He turned to the attendant walking past his row. "Excuse me," he said. "I think I might know what's wrong." The woman barely glanced at him. "We need a licensed medical professional. Please stay seated," she said automatically and kept moving. Noah's heart pounded. He knew what he looked like, a skinny black kid in a hoodie, jeans slightly too short, a backpack between his feet. But he also knew what a pulmonary embolism looked like. "Ma'am," he called louder, "please, pregnancy increases the risk 5-fold. Has she had leg swelling? Is she short of breath between every word?" That made her pause. She turned and stared. He stood up. "My grandmother had the same thing last year. I cared for her myself. It could be a clot. It's dangerous. She needs oxygen now, and maybe aspirin." The attendant hesitated. Then another voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew to first class, now." That was enough. The woman nodded tightly. "Come with me," she said. "But if you're wrong—" "I pray I'm not," Noah answered. As he followed her past the sleeping rows, heads turned. Eyes followed, some curious, some confused, a few looked skeptical. What was he doing? Who was he to walk toward first class like that? But Noah didn't look back. He remembered what his grandmother always said: knowledge means nothing if you're too scared to speak up. When they reached seat 2A, Lauren was gasping now, the oxygen mask not helping. Evan was pale himself, holding her hand, helpless. "Who is this?" he asked sharply when Noah approached. "Where's the doctor?" Monica spoke up. "There's no doctor. This young man says he may know what's going on." Evan's eyes narrowed. "This is my wife," he said, his voice cracking. "She's pregnant. I don't want guesses." Noah met his gaze calmly. "Sir, I understand, but I've seen this before. Her symptoms match pulmonary embolism, a clot in her lung, and at 28 weeks pregnant, that's high risk. She needs the clot stopped. Oxygen will help. And aspirin if she can take it." Monica opened the kit. "We have aspirin." Lauren's head turned slightly toward Noah. "My left leg. It was swollen yesterday. I thought it was normal." Noah nodded. "That's where it likely started. Evan looked between them. His breathing grew shallow, not from illness but from fear. For a moment he froze. The cabin noise seemed to fade into the background. All he could see was Lauren's pale face, her lips tinged blue, her chest rising in panicked gasps. Her eyes found his, not wild, not frantic, just pleading, silently begging for help. He wanted a doctor. He wanted certainty. But none was coming. He turned to Noah. The boy didn't waver. There was no arrogance in his eyes, just urgency, just purpose. Evan's grip on Lauren's hand tightened, then loosened. A beat passed. "Do what he says," Evan whispered finally, his voice thick. "Please." In that moment, the lines between first class and economy disappeared. There were no designer suits or worn hoodies, no status. Just a pregnant woman fighting to breathe and a teenager doing everything he could to help her. And in that narrow aisle, between luxury and desperation, something began to shift, though none of them realized it just yet. The scene inside first class was tense, nearly frozen. Lauren Callister lay reclined, eyes fluttering, her breathing shallow and fast. A thin layer of sweat coated her forehead. Evan knelt beside her, his hand still gripping hers, his face drawn and colorless. Monica handed Noah the aspirin, still unsure if she should be letting this teenager take over. But with no doctor on board and the passenger's condition worsening, hesitation was no longer an option. "She needs to chew it," Noah said, his voice calm but firm. "It'll get into her bloodstream faster." Monica nodded and carefully slipped the tablet past Lauren's lips. Noah looked around quickly. "We need to get her legs elevated, and loosen anything tight. Shoes, belt, jewelry, anything that might slow blood flow." Evan helped, removing Lauren's shoes and lifting her legs with the rolled-up blankets Monica had brought. The cabin around them was quiet, but not asleep anymore. A few heads peeked out from their pods, curious, some concerned. One man across the aisle muttered, "They're letting a kid do this?" Another woman shook her head disapprovingly, but no one stepped in, no one offered more. They just watched. Evan heard the whispers too, and his gaze flicked between Noah and the bystanders. Something hardened in his voice. "How do you know any of this?" Noah glanced up briefly but kept his hand steady as he adjusted the oxygen mask over Lauren's face. "Because my grandma had a clot like this, because I learned what I needed to take care of her, because where I come from, we don't have doctors on speed dial." The answer caught Evan off guard. For a moment he had no reply. Noah didn't give him time to find one. "She's stabilizing, but she still needs emergency care. This is temporary. Her heart rate is still high. We need to land." Monica had already notified the captain. "We're diverting to Frankfurt," she said quietly to Evan. "They'll have a medical team waiting." Noah stayed close to Lauren, gently talking her through slow, deep breaths. "You're okay. You're doing great," he whispered. "Help's on the way, just a little longer." Lauren looked at him, eyes glassy, lips trembling, and nodded weakly. Evan stared, slowly sitting back into his seat, watching this young man who didn't belong in first class, who wasn't supposed to know these things, taking control with steady hands and clear eyes. He didn't know what to say. Gratitude and shame tangled in his throat. The plane tilted slightly as it changed course, banking toward land. In the cabin, the line between confidence and panic had thinned to nothing, but in the quiet corner of seat 2A, Noah held that line. For the first time, Evan didn't see a kid in a hoodie. He saw the person saving his family. And as the soft hum of the engines continued, as lights blinked quietly overhead and flight attendants whispered into radios, one truth settled deeply over everyone in earshot. If Noah hadn't stood up, Lauren and the baby might not have survived. The landing lights flicked on. The captain's voice came through. "We'll be touching down in Frankfurt in 25 minutes. Medical team is on standby." Noah let out a slow breath. Lauren's color had started to return. The oxygen was helping. The aspirin was buying them time. But his hands were still clenched, his body still on high alert. And in the back of his mind he knew what this meant. Zurich was no longer within reach. The interview he'd flown across the ocean for, gone. But as he glanced at Lauren, still breathing, still holding on, he told himself what his grandmother always said: some moments matter more than plans. And that moment wasn't over yet. The most difficult part was still to come. The plane touched down at Frankfurt International just before dawn, the sky still dark beyond the runway lights. Paramedics were already waiting at the tarmac. The doors opened before the usual protocol, and Lauren Callister was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Evan at her side, still clutching her hand. Noah stepped back, letting the professionals take over. He had done what he could. But as they wheeled her down the narrow jet bridge, Lauren turned her head weakly toward him and whispered, "Thank you." Hours later, in the sterile fluorescent light of the hospital waiting room, Evan sat hunched over a foam cup of bitter vending machine coffee, barely touched. He had changed into a sweatshirt the hospital provided, but still looked out of place, like someone who didn't belong in discomfort. Across the room, Noah sat quietly, a stack of flashcards poking out of his backpack on the chair beside him. The overhead TV played silently, tuned to a local news station with German subtitles. Neither of them paid it any attention. A doctor emerged with a clipboard in hand. Evan stood up instantly. "Mr. Callister?" The man nodded. "Your wife is stable. The clot was confirmed in her left lung. She was very lucky it was caught early. The aspirin and oxygen administered on board likely prevented a worse outcome." Evan exhaled shakily and sat back down. "And the baby?" "Also stable. Heart rate has returned to normal. We'll continue monitoring, but things look good." The doctor offered a reassuring smile. "She's asking for you both." That night, while Lauren rested in her hospital bed, Evan found himself walking alone down the long, sterile corridor. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting dull reflections across the polished floor. He passed a man hunched in a wheelchair, wheeled gently by a nurse. An older woman stood outside a curtained room, arms crossed, face carved with worry. The silence between the beeps and footfalls felt heavy. Evan paused at a vending machine, watching a young boy press his face to the glass, as if hoping something inside could fix what was happening behind closed doors. And then he remembered Lauren's breath, shallow, desperate, the helplessness in her eyes, and Noah's voice steady in the chaos. If he hadn't listened, he turned away from the machine. Something had shifted inside him. Not a realization, a reckoning. They didn't speak much on the way to the room. Evan still wasn't sure what to say to Noah. When they reached the hallway outside, Noah stopped. "You should go in first," he said. Evan turned to him. "No, come with me. She asked for you." Inside, Lauren looked pale, but her eyes were alert, her breathing even. Monitors beeped softly beside her bed. "There you are," she said with a smile, reaching out. Noah approached slowly. "I'm glad you're okay, ma'am. Because of you," she said. "They told me what you did, that you stayed calm, that you saved us." Noah didn't know how to answer that, so he didn't. He just nodded. Evan pulled a chair closer. "You mentioned on the plane. You were headed to an interview?" Noah hesitated. "Yeah, a medical program in Zurich. The Young Global Health Scholars. They only take 50 students from around the world. It's kind of a big deal." "And the interview was today?" Evan said, more a statement than a question. Noah nodded again, quieter this time. "What?" Evan's voice lowered. "You knew you'd miss it when you stayed with her." Noah looked at him. "It wasn't a decision," he said. "She needed help. I couldn't walk away." Lauren looked between them. "And now what? Do they allow a makeup interview?" Noah gave a small shake of his head. "No. It's in person only. One shot. I'll apply again next year if I can. But I'll be 18. This was probably my only chance." Evan leaned back, absorbing that. The boy had risked everything. His future, his shot for a stranger. No press, no cameras, just instinct and principle. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. Heavy. Noah stood. "I should probably let you rest. I'll get my flight rebooked in the morning and head back home." Lauren reached out again. "Wait, you don't have to go just yet. There's something we want to ask you." Noah looked from her to Evan, and in Evan's eyes Noah saw the flicker of something new, not pity, not obligation, something else. A beginning. Whatever came next would start with a conversation, and that conversation was coming soon. Later that morning, the hotel cafe was quiet, the breakfast rush already past. Noah sat alone at a corner table, his notebook open beside a lukewarm cup of coffee. He wasn't writing, just staring at the same sentence he'd started 15 minutes ago. His thoughts weren't on the page, they were still in that hospital room, still with Lauren's tired but grateful eyes, and Evan's unreadable expression. He looked up when the chair across from him slid back. Evan Callister sat down, dressed in yesterday's rumpled travel clothes, holding his own cup of coffee. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. Noah closed the notebook slowly. "She doing okay?" "Better, sleeping. They've got her on a full course of anticoagulants, monitoring everything. Doctors say she'll carry to term if she rests." Evan paused, watching Noah. "He told me to come talk to you." Noah stayed quiet. He didn't know what was coming. Evan set his coffee down and leaned forward slightly. "Look, I don't know how to thank you. What you did, there's no real way to measure that." He took a breath. "But I'd like to try. I have the means. If there's something you need, I want to help." Noah's jaw tensed. He'd expected this, maybe dreaded it. The offer. The "how much do you want" moment. He looked Evan straight in the eye. "I don't want money." Evan didn't flinch. "Then what do you want?" Noah took a breath, voice low but clear. "My grandma, Mrs. Laverne Benson, she raised me after my mom passed. She's got heart failure, COPD, and arthritis so bad she can't climb our stairs anymore. Our insurance barely covers inhalers. She's been waiting 4 months for a cardiology referral because the local clinics are overbooked." He leaned in a little. "You want to help me? Help her. Get her the care she needs. That's more important than any check." Evan sat back, processing that. He'd expected a scholarship request, a job, even a college connection. But not this. Not someone asking for someone else. "And if I got her in with a private cardiologist, covered all her expenses?" he asked. Noah shook his head slowly. "That would help, sure. But she's not the only one. Our building's full of people like her, veterans, retirees, folks who've worked their whole lives and now can't afford a ride to the pharmacy. There's a clinic nearby, but they're drowning, one doctor for thousands, no transportation program, no funding for specialty meds." Evan's face was unreadable now. He didn't speak. Noah continued. "I'm not saying fix the system. But if you're serious, start by seeing it, really seeing what people like my grandma lived through just to survive." Evan looked down at his hands. For years he'd donated to global medical missions, written large checks for projects in countries he'd never visited, but he had never once thought to ask what happened in neighborhoods 20 miles from his own. He looked back at Noah. What would make a difference? Noah didn't hesitate. Invest in a real health initiative where we live, not charity, partnership. Hire local, include people from the community, build trust. Don't just put your name on a building. Put people in it who care. The words settled heavily on the table between them. Evan finally spoke. "We're building a hospital in Ghana right now. It's a good project. But I've never considered doing anything like that in Oakland." Noah shrugged. "Need's not about geography, it's about access, and who you choose to see." Evan looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted behind his eyes, not guilt, not pity. Understanding. He nodded once. "I'll think about that." Noah picked up his notebook again, but didn't open it. "That's all I'm asking." And for the first time since they'd met, Evan smiled. Not polite, not formal, just honest. "I'd like to meet your grandmother," he said quietly. Noah raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Evan's smile widened. "From what you've told me, she sounds like the kind of person who'd have a lot to say to a guy like me." And with that, the next step became clear. Because the real conversation, the one that would change more than just 2 lives, was about to begin. A week later, a black town car pulled up in front of a narrow apartment building in East Oakland. The paint on the walls had faded, and a paper sign taped to the entrance read, "Elevator out of order. Again." Evan Callister stepped out first. Adjusting the collar of his jacket, he looked up at the building, then over at his wife. Lauren followed carefully, now in her 3rd trimester, one hand resting on her belly. She smiled reassuringly at him. "You're more nervous than I was in labor," she said quietly. "That woman raised Noah. I want to make a good impression," Evan muttered. At the top of the stairs, Noah was already waiting. He waved them up, then reached out to help Lauren with the final steps. "She's excited you came," he said. "Made enough food for everyone in the building, probably." The hallway smelled like cornbread and stewed greens. Inside the apartment, everything was clean and polished. Old photographs lined the walls. Black and white wedding portraits, school pictures, faded graduation shots. In the center of the living room, sitting upright with oxygen tubing in her nose and a cane by her side, was Mrs. Laverne Benson. She wore a floral dress and a pearl necklace. Her hair was carefully pinned and her eyes were sharp. "These are the airplane people," she said with a dry tone. "Come in, don't let the heat out." Evan stepped forward, suddenly unsure of himself. "Mrs. Benson, thank you for having us. We brought a few things—" "Set them down," she interrupted, waving a hand toward the table without looking. "Sit. Then tell me what exactly you plan to do for this neighborhood and why I should believe a man who flew in on a plane and thinks bandages fix broken systems." Evan blinked. Then slowly, he sat, and he told her. About what Noah had said. About the gaps he'd never noticed. About wanting to build something lasting, not for recognition, but for service. About partnering with local doctors, funding transportation programs, offering free specialty care, and placing decision-making power in the hands of the community. Mrs. Benson listened without interruption. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, examining him like a judge deliberating sentence. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You're not as clueless as I expected. Still a bit green, but you're trying. That counts." Noah exhaled quietly in relief. Lauren laughed softly and reached for Mrs. Benson's hand. "We'd also like to offer you full private care. Anything you need, specialists, equipment, home visits." Mrs. Benson's eyes didn't soften, but her voice did. "You're kind. But don't offer it because you feel guilty. Do it because people like me have worth, even if we never save your life." "I know that now," Evan said simply. Later, as they toured the neighborhood, Noah pointed out the understaffed clinic, the pharmacy that rarely carried what his grandmother needed, and the long bus route people took just to get their prescriptions. Evan said very little, but he listened. Within months, the Oakfield Health Initiative was announced, a community-run health center with full services, funded by the Callister Foundation, guided by local voices, and piloted with Noah Benson's direct input. He accepted the offer to serve as its youth advisory chair and received a full scholarship to Stanford's pre-med program. In a hospital across town, when Lauren gave birth to a healthy baby girl, the question of her name lingered. "I've been thinking about a name," Lauren said, her voice soft, one hand resting on the swaddle. Evan looked up. "Me too. But I get the feeling we're not thinking of the same one." "Laverne," she said. He paused. "You're sure? That's a lot to carry." "She carried us," Lauren replied. "Not just me. Not just the baby. She changed something in you, too." Evan considered that. "Laverne Hope Callister?" Lauren smiled. "That sounds right." Evan nodded. "Then that's her name." Mrs. Benson held her first, whispering, "Strong name. Let's make sure she grows into it." As Evan watched the woman who had once called him Green Cradle his daughter, he understood the change was complete. Not just in his family, not just in Noah's future, but in himself. Because what Noah had asked for wasn't money. It wasn't status. It was dignity, and dignity, Evan now knew, was the only foundation worth building anything on. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.